And it's a deeper question. It comes back to that question of, it's not about immigration, right? It's not about anti-immigration, right? It's about human rights. It's about civil rights. It's about citizenship. That have passed around the country, and I'd like to note that at least according to the Department of Justice, there have only been 3 documented cases in the last decade. So you see a very big problem of non-citizens voting. I actually thought the problem was getting citizens to vote. But the anti-immigrant movement, knowing better, has passed a number of legislation around the country to ensure that only citizens can vote. The result has been, in each of those, that the African American vote has dropped by 5.4% in each state. 5.4%. In Arizona, where the anti-immigrant movement passed Initiative 200, which purported to curb services for those who could not show their status, the result has been that citizens have been denied access to social services, and to non-federally mandated services. These initiatives have multiplied around the country, and the result has been that not only are immigrants and refugees impacted, but also everyday citizens. In the United States, it takes on a much more serious tone. What most people don't know is that 8.9% of the African American community is without the documents needed to prove their citizenship. Not because they weren't born in this country, but because of Jim Crow laws that denied them the right to be issued a birth certificate by being born in a hospital. One of the big victories of the national anti-immigrant movement has been the Real ID Act, which will come into effect in 2010, which means that hundreds of thousands of African Americans will no longer be able to vote, to travel outside their state, to access social services, Medicaid, and Social Security. The response by the anti-immigrant movement is that it's just something that we have to take and understand in the fight to control migration. Easy to say when you are an organization that, while stripping rights from African American citizens and immigrants, also seeks to undermine the 14th Amendment to the Constitution of the United States. The 14th Amendment, a key civil rights legislation, that omnipotent monster out there. That these are our neighbors, these are people who we shop with, who we worship with, who we go to school with. That these are individuals who have simply decided that dividing our community is the best way to save it. Our response has to be that there is no safety in division, and there are no real solutions in division. The work for us today is to understand that the anti-immigrant movement is growing, and it is very popular, and it has a lot of momentum. But we have seen this before. We saw it in 1920 in Oregon. If you don't remember, in the 1920s, Oregon hosted the largest Ku Klux Klan membership west of the Mississippi. The city of Portland, the city of Eugene, the city of Salem were Klux towns, meaning that the majority of elected officials and key leaders were members of the Ku Klux Klan. I can tell you that most people did not see it as a big deal to be a member of the Ku Klux Klan. In the 1990s, we saw it again with an organization called Oregon Citizens Alliance, who spent the better part of a decade attacking the gay and lesbian community here in Oregon, attempting to restrict their rights. What some of us remember, though, is that that's not how the Oregon Citizens Alliance got its start. The Oregon Citizens Alliance first started doing its real work around fighting divestment from South Africa, because it opposed those who wanted to end apartheid in South Africa. Today, it's groups like OFER. And yes, they may purport to have a lot of members. You have the Minutemen who like to think of themselves as vigilantes with guns, saving America. But our role is to speak back and to push back and to be clear about what type of America we want. That is the work before us today.
You might have been up late last night, but you're still a hard act to follow. My name is Erica Steinbauer. I coordinate CAUSA, which is a statewide immigrant rights coalition here in Oregon. And I come to this issue not as an expert, but as an organizer and as someone who has gone head-to-head with these fine folks that Eric Ward was just telling us about. So who are they here in Oregon, and what have they been up to so far? And I think that this is important to think about and consider, because that way we'll know what led up to these ballot measures and what got us in this situation. As Eric said, the main active anti-immigrant group here in the state is a group called Oregonians for Immigration Reform. And their leaders are Jim Ludwig and Rick Hickey, among other folks. And there's also an active chapter, actually I'm not sure how active they are anymore, but of the Oregon Minutemen, and I know that they were enthusiastically supporting sending folks down with rifles and armchairs to sit on the US-Mexico border to try to catch and document immigrants crossing over. And in our fine House Republican caucus, there's also a number of anti-immigrant folks who are aggressively pushing an agenda to restrict immigrant rights and the rights of working and poor people generally. And fortunately, we've been able to get some of them out of there, but some legislators who are still active are Linda Flores and Kim Thatcher. And finally, fueling the fire, fanning the flames, are talk radio hosts such as Lars Larson, right-wing talk radio, that pretty much devotes its airtime to, if it's not scapegoating one group, it's scapegoating another, and the target of the moment is the immigrant and refugee community. Prior to putting these measures on the ballot, or attempting to, these groups have been, and these individuals have been active on talk radio, mobilizing calls to our congressmen and senators during the immigration reform debate, scaring Salem legislators into voting not our way on issues. They've pushed a legislative agenda, and one of the things I'll get to is, since they've in many ways been shut out of the legislative process, they are pursuing these ballot measures as an attempt to prey upon people's fears and pass them. And we've actually successfully defeated a number of bills that would have done what these ballot measures are doing. We've defeated them through the last number of legislative sessions. Bills to restrict immigrants' access to a driver's license, bills to limit bilingual education, bills to require proof of citizenship to register to vote. All of these bills, these legislators and groups have already put forward, and legislators refuse to let them pass. Not that the Democratic Party is a beacon of progressiveness for us, but that has been the case so far until yesterday, at least. That's kind of what's led us up to this point. And since, in many ways, right-wing conservatives are now shut out of the Senate, House, and governorship, there are over 100 bad ballot measures being proposed for the November 2008 ballot. Not all anti-immigrant, but anti-union, anti-gay, lots of ballot measures. And that puts us in a difficult position because many of our natural allies are going to be spending their precious resources and time fighting for their own lives as well. So all of this climate and the news and the media and the fear that's been swept up around this has created a very difficult political situation, so much so, in fact, that our governor and vulnerable Democrats have started to cave on us. And what happened yesterday was that, for those of you who haven't heard, is that Oregon Governor Ted Kulongoski signed an executive order, in effect, taking away undocumented immigrants' rights to a driver's license. And he did that not by actually changing law, because he doesn't have authority to do that, but he severely restricted the documents that DMV will now accept to get a driver's license. The anti-immigrant groups have told us they're going to pursue their ballot measures anyway, so a lot of good that did for us. And if you want more information on the executive order, I just wanted to note we did some basic answer sheets on the answers that we have at this point, and they're outside. Before you make copies of the Spanish language papers, download a corrected version off of our website. So I wanted to take a minute to go over what exactly are these ballot measures before we go into what the actual human impact will be, and since Eric so nicely put it in a larger picture for us. The first one, which has shy of about 1,500 signatures to get on, so it's going to be on the ballot, is measure number 19. And this, by the way, is on a summary of the orange sheet, and I'm not going to off to you because you have it. But it basically will severely restrict bilingual education programs. Never mind that teachers are probably the best experts on how to teach kids. Never mind that it's been proven that kids don't learn best by English immersion, they learn best in bilingual education programs. And for younger kids, that means restricting bilingual education to 1 year. If you're older, I think the limit goes as much as 2 years. And Abdul will talk about more of the human impacts of that. The second one, which my understanding is will be hitting the streets this next week, so we should all keep an eye out for it when we're going to the post office, grocery store, and other places, is number 112. It's a nice big package of all the things we don't want to have happen in this state. The first one is that well, it goes about it in a kind of weird way, but it basically says that any public employee, including local police, would need to cooperate with federal immigration. This doesn't mean only local police, it means teachers, it means anyone who's a public employee. And this is bad for a number of reasons. One is that it erodes community trust. People, immigrant refugees, other folks will no longer feel safe, if they ever felt safe, going to police to report crimes. The other thing that this measure would do is require first-time Oregon voters to provide proof of citizenship when registering to vote. And as Eric said, this is not a documented problem. So if any of your organizations participate in voter registration drives, you basically won't be able to do that anymore because of the kinds of documents you will need to require. It's not something you can just sign someone up to do on their front doorstep. And this would also shut out, obviously, other people of color and working folks out of the process, because most often it's our community-based organizations and unions that use voter registration drives to get folks to vote. And finally, it would require proof of legal residence to get a driver's license. And this would basically codify the governor's executive order, which is right now an administrative rule in Oregon law. And it will do this if the legislature doesn't do it for us already in February. And the problem with that is that besides having unlicensed, uninsured drivers on the road, is that you're basically having DMV employees be deputized as ICE agents. And that's not fair to the employees. And that's not fair to the folks going in, because the employees aren't experts, they aren't trained on what a valid immigration document looks like. And when I end, I will tell you an incident that happened last night around that. So that's what the two measures do and why we're so concerned about it, besides the kind of larger philosophical reasons of what kind of country do we want to have. This will lead to real concrete harm in immigrant refugees' daily lives, but also in the lives of all Oregonians. If you have a car accident with someone who couldn't get a driver's license, if people are no longer able to vote, I feel that our democracy suffers. So that's some of the issues that are going to be before voters on the ballot. And as I said, 112 is currently still in the in the signature gathering phase, and so we should be trying to educate all of our community groups, civic clubs, about what its true impacts are so people know not to sign that for that ballot measure. So, in closing, I just wanted to say I got a call at midnight last night from the family members of a girl. Her name was Alejandra. She's 20 years old and a PCC student. And she went yesterday to DMV to get a replacement license because I think she had lost hers. And the employees asked her for her social security number. Now, currently they shouldn't be doing that, but they did. And she gave them a card that had her real social security number on it, but the paper was fake, the document was fake. They called the cops. She is now at the Hillsborough jail and has an ICE hold on her, and her hearing is 3 p.m. Monday. And her parents asked me to, we were helping put them in touch with lawyers, although at this juncture I don't know what sort of case she has. But her parents asked me to try to get people to go and support her so she knows that she's not alone in this. So her hearing is at 3 p.m. on Monday at the Hillsborough Municipal Court. I think the address is 150 East Main Street, but if you're going, I would verify it online. And I know that would mean a lot to her. The other thing is, if you have fake documents, don't give them to DMV, please, because they will call the cops. And now, because of a recent agreement between the sheriffs and the county jails and ICE, if a foreign-born person goes into a jail, their information will be given to ICE, and ICE will put a hold on them if they aren't legally here. So that's just one example of how this local collaboration and lack of being able to get a driver's license will expand these problems many times. And I think we all need to think about that. So I think that the most important face on this story is the human face, and that's why I'm glad that Abdul is going to tell us about some of his experiences.
Okay. Tupendera. Spudi no entono. Sense of ka immigration problem. Abdul Onkono. Afmami nachilami. Kemedi no en. Kamo sense I wanted to start by giving you guys a taste of what it felt like for a lot of us when we come here. The language that I was speaking is called Timini. It's spoken in Sierra Leone in the northern province. If you were in Sierra Leone right now in Timini land, how long do you think it will take you to learn that language? My name is Abdul Fofana. I am an immigrant who came to this country in 1990. I want to start, first of all, by saying that the reason why I'm confident enough to be up here to talk to you guys, it's because of ESL. The reason why my English is so good, ESL also has a big part that it played in that. I'm going to talk to you guys from two different perspectives today. The first perspective is going to be my own personal experience. And then the second perspective will be on behalf of the refugee youths that I work with. So I came into this country in 1990, and in all places I was in Washington, D.C. And I was in the projects in Washington, D.C. And I don't know if anybody has been around the projects in D.C., but it's nothing like where we're at right now. So, lucky for me, Sierra Leone was colonized by the British, so we spoke British English in Freetown and in schools that we went to back home. So for me to learn the English that I speak now, it was basically, I just learned a few slangs and mixed it up, and now I sound like this. But even with having that English experience in Sierra Leone before I came, I still struggled a lot when I came to this country. Most of you immigrants and foreigners in here, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. As a 13-year-old, when I came, I didn't understand the school system, the American school system. In Africa, we sat in one classroom and all the teachers came into that classroom. So here I was at this middle school in DC. I didn't know how the school system operated. I remember they gave me a locker. This is the story that I told Casey and these guys earlier, and they wanted me to tell it. I remember I was assigned a locker, and the locker had a combination. Well, this was my first time ever having a locker. So I remember somebody saying, you turn, and you turn, and then it opens. So that's what I did. I looked at the combination, I turned, and I turned, but it wouldn't open. So after being frustrated for a while, I started carrying all of my books in my hand as I was going through the different subjects throughout the day. I had an African American guy that was next to me. His name was Devon. I remember that name to this day because of that experience that I had. Devon was the guy that I used to pay with my lunch money so he can help me open the locker. And I remember he used to look at me and he would say, man, what's wrong with you, man? What's wrong with you? I said, Africa, what's wrong with you, man? All you gotta do is just go like that, go like that, go like that. And he opens. And he would never take the time to show me this process. So I would come around him and want to peek and look over so I can see what I'm doing wrong. After I tried for days, it didn't work. I just got used to the idea of not using the locker and just holding my books in my hand. So I had 6th period. And in 6th period one day, the teacher asked me, he said, Abdul, why are you carrying all your books? So I told her, I said, well, I don't understand this locker business. I said, they tell me to put the combination, I put the numbers down, but it doesn't open. So then the lady finally said, let's go to your locker. And she walked with me to the locker. And she actually showed me that the first time you turn to the right, the second time you turn to the left, and then the third time you turn again to right, then the locker opens. So after the lady showed me that, I felt very happy, and I couldn't wait for Devon to come back and see me open this locker, you know. And when Devon finally came around the next day, and he saw me open the locker, he's looking at me like, okay, Africa, okay. You know, I told him, I said, yeah, I said, I didn't understand the concept of it, but now I do. And you know who that teacher was? That teacher was the teacher that was in my ESL class. Okay? So that teacher, first of all, I wondered why all the other teachers did not notice that I was carrying my books all this time. She was the only teacher that noticed that I kept on carrying my books and took the time to ask me why and actually help me understand the concept of opening the locker. Okay? So, ESL teachers create an environment in the school that make us immigrants feel comfortable. And when you're learning, if you're not comfortable, it's impossible for you to learn. The ESL teacher had the cultural competency to understand or want to understand who I was, what my background was, and what I had been through. Okay? So, here I am, 17 years in America, I'm still learning English. There are conversations that I have with people, and they will use a certain word, and I still will say, what does that mean? So, for me, I'm looked at as someone who has succeeded in America by the youths that I work with. Like Casey was saying, I work as an African Refugee Youth Coordinator, and my job is to help these immigrants and refugee kids come to this country and understand the system. So, I have several kids that are about 14 years old who were born in refugee camps, and they come here and they have never been to school before. And because the American public school system puts you in class in accordance to your age. So if you're 14, then you're going to be a freshman in high school. Okay? So, when my kids are sitting in that classroom, and the teacher will talk, like how I started talking, that's how they feel the whole entire class time. They go home, they don't understand what the homework was. They don't understand the due date for the homework. And these kids they're also looked at sometimes from their teachers as just being stupid because they don't participate in class, not because they're not active or they don't want to evolve. They don't feel comfortable enough that their English is up to par to where they can even raise their hand sometimes to say, I want to go use the restroom. So, for us, ESL is the class that when we went in there, we saw other immigrants and other foreigners like ourselves, and we felt comfortable to make mistakes speaking English in that classroom because everyone else is just like us. And even though I've been in this country for so long, every test that I take in high school and part of college, I was always the last person to finish. That's because I had to read it in English, and then in my mind try to translate it in one of my dialects, one of my languages I know, before I can fully understand what it is, before I answer the question. So I have kids now that some of their parents, the only expectation that they have of them is to get up in the morning and have enough courage to show up back to the school. They don't understand anything. So the idea of trying to put years on how long it would take for someone to understand English, to me, sounds kind of crazy. And not only that, it also sounds like people don't care. We live in a land where it's said to be a melting pot, and different people from different parts of the world have been coming here since the beginning, and no matter what, we still will continue to come. The question that I pose to you guys, how many years do you guys think it'll take you guys if you guys went to Africa to learn a language? So, it's a system that I think that is setting our kids to fail. Because when we come from Mexico or Nicaragua or Kenya, we think that when we come to America, we're here because things are going to get better. We're here for the American dream. And when we come here, some of my kids, they sit in the classroom and they're passionate and they want to learn. They don't understand the language. The teachers start looking at them like they're stupid. Their self-esteem gets damaged and they don't want to go back to school. So a lot of them tell me, Abdul, I don't want to go back to that school. Some of them just drop out. So I want you to picture a kid that was in a refugee camp somewhere in Africa who was told that they're going to be in heaven once they come to America. Because that's what we think of America. Wherever we're from, we think that this is heaven. In fact, growing up in Sierra Leone, we used to think that America is on the sky. So when they come here, we see everything. We see all the lights, we see all the glitter, we see all the glamour, we see everything. And we want that. Keep in mind that we have the pressure of people back home who expect us to succeed because we're in America. So automatically, they look at us as people who already have succeeded. So you're 14, 13, 16 years old, you're here, you have that burden on your shoulder, and now you've lost appetite to even go to school because you don't understand anything about this country, the language, nothing. So these kids come here, they watch a few rap videos, they see the 50 Cents, they see the Sean Puffy Combs, and now they want to bling bling, they want Nike, they want FUBU, and they want all this stuff. The kid is not going to school, and a lot of us don't even tell our parents. Because some of us, if you tell your parent that you're not going to go to school, that's a whole different issue. But the kid leave at home, the parent thinks that the kid is going to go to school, the kid just hangs around the block, around the corner, okay? Now these kids become the perfect target for the drug dealers around the neighborhoods. Because when all the other kids are in classrooms, they're in the corners, hanging around. And they see the drug dealers with the nice cars and the nice clothing, just like the rappers that they see on the TVs. So these people approach them and entice them and persuade them into making money. If you're a kid that comes from a good background, you're going to say no. But if you're a kid that comes from a family of 9, and you're the eldest, and you have other siblings that you left back home, and you came with your mother, and your father is still in a refugee camp, and you're being pressured to buy calling cards to check on those people back there, you just might say yes. It's quick money. You don't have to go through anything. You don't have to know enough English to sell drugs. It's mostly a sign language. Someone comes, look at you, you look at them, you got the goods, they say they want, you give them the goods. You don't even have to talk much English to do that. So a lot of the kids are doing that now. They say yes. So here they are in America, 2 or 3 years, they're selling drugs, they get caught by the police, they get locked up. So what happened to that American dream that the kid was dreaming about when he was in a refugee camp? Now here's the kid in an American jail with no foundation to be successful at all. So I want you guys to think about that. I think that it'd be a very terrible thing to cut back on ESL, because learning English is a process that can take a lifetime for a lot of us. Even for some of you Americans, you're still learning English. So imagine what it's like for us. Thank you.
Thank you. So we're gonna have the Q&A time, but before, so we're gonna have, there's a two Q&A mics at the room. So if you have a question for the speakers, I will encourage you to use those two mics. But before, I will have a quick question for, and any one of you can respond. Since we are talking about these two ballot initiatives, there has been any state in the country that has also faced similar anti-immigrant, those two anti-immigrant ballot initiatives, the ESL one and the Respect Law Act one, that you can think of, and what was their experience, and whether they would be successful or defeated?
Well, in regards to, driver's license, if people have been watching the catastrophe in New York that just occurred recently, with the governor actually wanting to ensure that people are licensed to drive, that there's safety on the roads, and the backlash was so severe that now he has backtracked, and his answer now is to create two different types of IDs. One for those who have documents and are in status, are citizens, and then those who are not. So what's the problem with that? Well, the problem with that is that who in their right mind, if you're out of status, are going to go get a special ID that marks that you're out of status, right? Particularly in this climate. Again, it goes back, to the war of attrition. The answer by the anti-immigrant movement is not to really create solutions. They have no solution, right? And their solution is to obey, people would just enforce the law. Well, the law doesn't work, and it hasn't worked for the last 30 years, right? You've asked 3 immigration officials a question about immigration law, and I guarantee you're going to get 3 different answers, because it's confusing and it's not it just doesn't make sense. So their response with something that doesn't make sense then is to make it even more confusing. So now we're going to get law enforcement who haven't been trained in immigration law, give them a 5-day training and have them go out and enforce immigration law, right? Because that's really going to work. In regards to driver's license, well, we're worried about safety on the road, so the way we're going to deal with that is we're going to force people to drive illegally, ensuring that they don't have access to insurance. Because God knows when a person is suffering and trying to feed their family, they're not going to drive a car. It's just not rational because it's not, about fixing the system. It's not about finding real solutions. It's about creating tension. In regards to bilingual education, it doesn't have a good track record when it's been under attack. I would point people to successes, to look at Colorado and to look at Arizona and how they mobilize. The key piece is that you have, if you understand these things are happening and you truly are concerned, you have to start mobilizing now. You cannot wait. And mobilizing means talking to everyday people about what is really going on in our communities and what is the impact of stripping bilingual education and how does that, impact as we try to build a unified community.
Just an update on the whole Spitzer governor of New York thing. Although we might have problems with driving certificates, the antis actually still think it's a bad thing because we're giving them benefits. So they, Spitzer caved on that as well and just took the entire proposal back on either Wednesday or Thursday, and then on Friday, Kulongoski signed his executive order.
We're getting started on the left.
Thanks for everything y'all have said. It's been amazing. As a person who benefits from a system of violent inequality because of my skin color and my gender and other things, I feel like it's important for me to engage people, to be one of the first people to step up and engage folks who are anti-immigrant and anti-other things. In your experience, what are some of the best, and this is a continual struggle, it's difficult every time. One of the biggest frames that's often used is immediately folks will go to, well, they are illegal or they are draining resources. What are some effective ways to shift that frame and immediately get the discussion someplace so that it's productive instead of just collapsing in shouting matches, which doesn't seem to work?
There isn't a silver bullet, and we have, in case you haven't noticed, we've been losing that messaging for. But I think it depends on who you're talking with, who the audience is, who's around them, and who you're trying to influence, because really the Jim Lepicks of the world, I'm not going to change his mind. But, this is what you do when you do like electoral campaigns. A lot of people are undecided out there, and that's really who our targets are. So you want to talk about your values. You want to, depending on which group you're talking to, you want to call out the race element. You want to show their connections to white supremacist groups because people get uncomfortable about that. They say, oh, I'm not a racist, and then if you show how these groups really are, then they won't want to be associated with that sort of platform. But I think more than that, it's about trying to turn around this debate from an us versus them type scenario and have it be, this is our country, immigrants share our values, this is what they're contributing to our economy, I'm glad they're here, I think that we shall be afforded some basic human rights around here. Those are some ideas, obviously depending on which group you're talking to, others will appeal more than others.
If I could add something to that, like Erica said, it really depends on the particular individual that you're talking with or the group, but also it helps to, a lot of the people that say our country, they need to start thinking outside, because a lot of the reason why we come here from our countries, wherever we come from, it is because of things that are directly related to what we do in this country. So, in claiming America, you really need to understand what is America and who is American. Because we come here because of some of the things that we do as Americans. So then, if you look at it from that perspective, or if you're able to educate someone and explain that to them, then some people will feel like, well, there's a level of responsibility.
And let me say this, I mean, because I think it's a big question. We get caught up in this question of, well, well, it's illegal, or they're just breaking, they're breaking the law. And somehow this is, let's be honest, this is said, has then, the excuse is because people may have broken the law, then that now we can do whatever we want to them, right? And that's not the type of society I want to live in. It's not the type of society that I live in. And I think that, our response, has to be clear. This is not an immigrant or an anti-immigrant issue, right? This is about a choice between standing up for values that respect human dignity or one that allows bigotry and white supremacy to reign supreme. That's what we're talking about. And if people want to talk about legal and illegal, I like to remind people that everything that Nazi Germany did was legal, right? Everything that the Hungarian freedom fighters did was illegal. Those who hid the Jewish community during World War II were breaking the law. And when we're talking about the morality of human life, right, then my question to the anti-immigrant movement is that what type of movement are you building when you celebrate hundreds of deaths on the border, when you celebrate the stripping away and the dividing of families, of making people hide in the shadows of society and allow them to be exploited? What type of movement is that you are building, and that you find it humorous? You take pride in celebrating the death of others. And that is not a movement that we need here in the United States. And I think when people start bringing up the question of legal or illegal, we need to have this conversation about what do they really mean and what are the real solutions. The anti-immigrant movement has no real solution except to create and increase the suffering of people who are migrating, right? These are economic people who are being forced out of their communities and being forced to the United States, and they have no real solutions except to help them suffer more.
Is this working? Okay. Tomorrow I've been invited to address a congregation, and I think we need to start reaching out. They want me to talk about immigration. Now, it's been a long time since I came to this country, but I'm a citizen and glad to do that. And I think we have tremendous power, folks. That this is what I want. I just want to share a couple of ideas that we could use. I get 3 or 4 minutes to talk there, so I try to make it no longer or shorter. Next week we celebrate Thanksgiving. And that is when we had our white forefathers come to Plymouth Rock. And they did not see a wall. They did not ask about licenses. They were invited to come. And I think there are 2 worldviews that we have here. And by the way, I compliment you folks. Do not use the word illegal. That's their word. That is their word, and that is divisive, and that is negative. No person on this earth is illegal. None. There are statuses that may be temporary illegal, like when you drive down the highway and exceed the speed limit, you're illegal. Like when you send in your taxes and you didn't quite send in everything, that's illegal. Or when the top echelon of our government goes into an illegal war and stays there, that's illegal. Those are impeachable offenses, and that's the kind of legality we want to go against. But there's 2 types of worldviews. One is built on fear, hatred, divisiveness, and racism. Close your eyes and see if you want to be there. That is part of America. There's another part that is built on compassion, on love, on forgiveness, and inclusiveness. It is built on the American Constitution. It says, we the people, not we the citizens. It says that all people, all rights, that we are created by our Creator for inalienable rights. Among them are freedom, life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, which includes driving. Okay, if we want to look at, as far as driving, legality is a temporary status, and driving is all about safety. You know, I happen to be an insurance agent, so I know that you need to have a driver's license. It has nothing to do with whether you're an immigrant, a legal person or not. And okay, and then just briefly, I want to say that the Bible is chock full of guidance for us. I think we can take the good message to all people. In fact, about the fact that, what does it say in the Bible? Welcome the stranger. You know, what does Jesus say? You know, he said, I was a stranger and you gave me to eat, you gave me food.
You have your questions, sir. I'm sorry.
I am. I'm winding it up. What I'm saying is there's a positive message we are not saying. I challenge every single one of you to do that. When you go home to a Thanksgiving dinner, set a place for the stranger and the alien. Tell your family and your friends why you're doing that. We need to talk to our legislators and demand from Kulongoski on down to the White House that they stop it. This is racist. This is hatred. That's one side. And I think the other side is the good part of us based on the Bible. And the Bible, by the way, says, do good to the stranger, for you may not know that some of them are angels. I know that.
Thank you.
Thank you to the speakers. My name is Laura, and I'm with the Freedom Socialist Party. I also am a bilingual teacher, bilingual elementary school teacher. And I'm here to say that this stuff, I mean, I have a lot of things, but this stuff is so anti-child. It is the most vulnerable in our communities. And the law initiative even says it's 1 year for elementary children to get English. 2 years if you're older. 1 year, I mean, research, as a teacher, we know that the younger you are, the harder it actually is to learn a second language, cognitively. So it is designed to really damage children, and damage children who didn't choose to come here. Children who are here because of the foreign policy decisions of this U.S. government that forces their families to migrate. And, you know, I mean, like the young woman from PCC, I know this woman, and she's been in this country for years, and she is being kept in a jail with no contact with her family, which is just, it's hideous. But I guess my question is, you know, what can we do as a community to build a multi-issue movement against these measures? Because these measures are not only aimed at immigrants. They are aimed at labor. They are aimed at my job, certainly. They are aimed at, there's certainly anti-gay and anti-women initiatives. So what can we do to build a multi-issue movement so that all of us are working together as allies to move forward?
Thank you.
I think that we're going to have a lot of opportunities for alliance building. I mean, just trying to look at the positive side of the situation, right, for November, because they're pretty much trying to pick at every vulnerable group here. And so, on one hand, we could see it as a scarcity of resources, but on the other hand, I think the true opportunities for alliance building are when you can actually be there for other people on their key issues. And so, we have to say that when we're for immigrant and refugees, we also are for labor rights, we're for queer rights, we're for women's rights, and not use messaging in our campaigns that undermines other people's campaigns. And especially in the ballot measure fight, I think it takes a lot of hard work and accountability to actually do that. And that's why forums like this are very important, and why we're committed to working with the CIO to have a strong grassroots voice to the ballot measure campaign, because it's important that our now undermine what we're doing. So that's just kind of elective on the ballot measure front.
And national identity. That is the real debate that is going on. The anti-immigrant movement is just not honest. As I said before, you know, it codes this debate because it's afraid to actually have this real debate about what the society is going to look like. And there is a deep fear in this country, right? I point back to, if you remember, the militia movement that was active in the Pacific Northwest. People remember the militia movement? Other folks running around with guns. And, you know, a lot of the questions from the media at the time was, as we were approaching Y2K during 2000, you know, what are they going to be doing? You know, what's going to be happening? Are they going to be terrorist acts? And, you know, my response was that they're going to be doing the same thing we all are going to be doing. We're going to have our feet up, popping popcorn, and watching Lawrence Welk, right? Because they weren't talking about January 1st, 2000. The white supremacist movement at that time was talking about 2050. Why 2050? Because that's when the U.S. Census says that, well, how the white supremacist movement liked to say it was that whites were going to be in the minority, right? Listen to that. Whites are going to be in the minority. Be afraid, right? The honest way of saying it is that there's going to be no clear racial or ethnic majority in the United States, which is a very different thing. And so for those who want to perpetuate racism, they have some very serious questions to answer. And the question to answer is, how do you deal with this problem? Do you find a new group to make white, to keep a numerical majority? And you may find that funny until you remember that the Irish were not always considered white, right? The Italians were not always considered white. There's an interesting letter up in Owatonna, Minnesota, in the small museum up there. A young man, German man, who's writing home to his family, talking about the work he was doing in the early 1800s. And he says to his family, I'm having a great time, I'm earning good money. The only problem is, I'm the only white person here. Everybody else is Swedish, right? So, this is a very, real question that's being debated on the vehicle of immigration. And if you don't find a new numerical majority, then what else do you do? Well, then perhaps you institute, apartheid-like laws where you don't have to be the numerical majority to hold on to institutional power, right? And we see that if you look at a lot of the anti-immigrant initiatives that are being passed, particularly in California and Arizona, they have a very pre-apartheid-like legal system being put into place that basically is creating two types of citizens in this country. And I can tell you as an African American, I'm already familiar with that. And so when the anti-immigrant movement says, well, we just want to mess with the 14th Amendment because, we just want to get a control on migration, but Eric, you and your community don't have to worry. However, they're taking money from the Eugenics Foundation. They're hanging out with the Council of Conservative Citizens. I'm sorry if I don't believe that your intentions are honest. And if the Minutemen, I'll finish this out, what are they doing? If the Minutemen were really concerned about what was happening in America, instead of patrolling the borders with guns and chasing people into the hottest part of the desert where they can die of dehydration, maybe they could show their real volunteer spirit, their real patriotism by putting down those guns and actually go getting real jobs in the fields. Granted, you may lose an arm, you may lose a finger, you may not get paid well, but if you really care about what's going on in this country, why don't you go do something real instead of playing G.I. Joe in the woods?
Casey, can I add something to that? Why ESL? Well, the anti-immigrant movement, to me, I look at it in three different ways. The first way is to restrict immigrants coming inside of this country. The second way is to make sure that the immigrants that are here already, to get rid of them. And the third way is, if you can't get rid of them, then make their life hell while they're here. So, and if you're going to do that, we heard an elementary school bilingual teacher said that the kids who takes longer to learn get 1 year, and then the adults get 2 years. Okay? So, when we come here, just like the story that I was talking about with my kids, that get frustrated with the school system because they're not learning, they don't understand English. Well, what happens to the kids? They hang around the blocks. The drug dealers approach them. They say yes. They get locked up. So, and when these kids come out, this is very, very serious, okay? We've heard of a story about an elder immigrant who shot his family and then shot himself. Did you guys hear about that in the news sometime back? Right? Well, just think about that kid that comes here with the hopes of getting a piece of that American pie or that American dream. And now they're 3 years in America, they're behind bars. Okay? When that kid comes out, probably too old to even want to continue with high school, don't have no background, no foundation to go to college, okay? What kind of job is this person going to have in this society? So, that's my answer. Make it hell for them. Make sure that they don't learn the English so they can't function in this society. Then you would not have to compete with them in the race for that American dream.
My question is actually about messaging around the ballot measure campaigns, and we talked a little bit about that, but later this afternoon I know we're going to have a strategy session. And sometimes I think in the immigrant rights movement we tend to not purposefully, but use messages that are divisive. So when you see people saying immigrant workers are not terrorists, you're saying somebody else is, another immigrant community usually. Or when you say we're all immigrants, some people weren't, some people were here originally or were brought in chains. And I'm curious, as we fight these ballot measures, what are some of the specific messages in other states that you've seen that are positive? And what messages, although they might win, are dangerous?
It can be hard to have real positive messages in ballot measure campaigns because a lot of time in the actual campaign you're assuming that the electorate's going to be pretty uninformed and disengaged, and so everything's based upon polling and how different messages poll. And what that when people vote, they care about themselves, and so you want to point out how a particular situation is going to be bad for them. And so, for example, on ballot measure 112, messages probably in the mainstream campaign probably aren't going to be about how this is creating a second class of citizens, and this is bad for the immigrant community. It's going to be, do you really want your insurance rates to go up? And that's not a terrible thing, or a terrible message to use, but it's not really getting at the heart of the problem. Other pretty damaging messages that I know after talking with Colorado folks that were used in the ESL campaign were, you know, if we take away this whole bilingual ed thing, you're going to have those brown kids in the classroom with you. And so then, even though they won the campaign, the next time around in the legislature, they use that same message around them to really restrict bilingual ed. So we have to make sure to, it's a fine line to walk between using messages that appeal to people's self-interest so they'll vote the right way on the issue, but then also not using messages that undercut your community, your organizing, or another ally community's organizing.
You know, I think, you know, the key pieces are, in regards to messaging, is that, you know, you have to develop it early, and you have to understand that you're going to be talking to multiple communities that have multiple concerns, and so that, you know, you have to address the conversations, you know, to those concerns. You know, with that said, you know, I think you do have to stay away from things that, you know, you can't talk about. There's no such thing as good immigrants and bad immigrants, and that is what the anti-immigrant movement is trying to frame. You know, that, you know, there are certain good immigrants, you know, those who are have status. You know, and my response to those immigrants and refugees who have status is just they just haven't built up the momentum yet to come after you, but they will. you know, and so don't allow, you know, this movement to come in, whether you're an immigrant, a refugee or not, you have status or not, don't let them come in and divide neighbor against neighbor, neighborhood against neighborhood, town against town. They are very effective at this, but these groups don't come into our communities bringing the racism, you know, bringing the sexism, the homophobia, the anti-Semitism. They simply exploit the bigotry that already exists. And so while we have to go into campaign mode, and there are those who will run, you know, a statewide campaign, and they'll tell you that, you know, they need 50 plus 1, you know, because that's the political world out there. That's going to happen. But while that's happening, there's some stuff that we need to do. And what we need to do as a community is that we need to let the anti-immigrant movement know that for every initiative that they run, that we're going to use it as an opportunity to reach 10,000 new people. Because there are people out there who are trying to figure this out and want to know, you know, how they begin to build inclusive communities. And we're going to use every single one of these. And we can't look at it as we're only going to take on this campaign because we want to win. You know, we want that 50 plus 1. There are other things that we also want, and we want to use it as that opportunity to build community and to build movement. And finally, the last piece, in regards to whatever your message and framing is that one of the messages to the anti-immigrant movement has to be this. Even if you beat us this time and outlaw bilingual education, we're going to set it up in our homes. It is not going to go away. If you begin to arrest people, we'll hide them. If you take away the rights of social services, we'll find doctors to do it for free. We will not allow you to come into our communities, tear them apart, and to leave people vulnerable. We're drawing a line in the sand. And while we will fight you, we will not allow any individual in our community to be any longer isolated.
Hi, I'm Emma with Radical Women, and I wanted to touch a little bit on strategy because it's something that Radical Women was involved with back in '92 was a coalition called Bigot Busters, which was which was going out campaigning against Measure 9, which was an anti-gay measure at the time back in '92. And what they would do is people in the coalition would go out with Bigot Busters, would go out to, say, a shopping mall out in Hillsborough and hand out leaflets to people who were going or exiting the mall before they got to the petitioners out, and basically to educate people on why they didn't feel that they should be signing a petition or something along those lines. And so I just wanted to get some ideas or get some feedback on what people thought would be a really great way to do some community outreach, whether it's going out into the communities, the neighborhoods, maybe door to door, or some sort of direct action to get out and really educate the public on these measures.
Thank you. Actually, I'm going to just let you know that we're going to actually have that session on the second part of it. So once we finish this one, because we're just running out of time, we will have that strategy, what will be some actions that we can do, and then we'll have the feedback. So I'll hold your question for a minute. I hope that doesn't mean that I'm going to disregard, but I'm going to just let you know that we're going to have that, the second session as a strategy.
Hi, my name is Sandra Hernandez, and I'm Brazilian. And by the way, I'm American because I was born in the American continent. I think that's for you all, because we all feel like this. I don't have a question. Actually, I would like to contribute with a thought for our discussions this afternoon. First, why ESL? Great question. I have this on my mind as well. And Abdul, I really share with you what you were saying, but I would go beyond. That's one of my suggestions for our discussions, because I have been feeling this recently, that people are really feared about what we are bringing to this piece of land. This is not a country, this is a piece of land for me, as any others in the world. So in this place, people are feared of being acculturated by another language, or many other languages. And one of them is Spanish, and yours and ours. Mine is Portuguese and French. We have many. So there's a fear of if we don't stop people like us learning English, but they have to learn our language if they want to speak with us as well and understand our cultures. So that's one of my perceptions. But also I want to say thank you, Eric, for brought the word immigration, because for me, guess what was in my mind? And I cried after you asked this, because that's just about barbed wire. That's what I see when suddenly it came to me. I mean, immigration wasn't like this before. It became a feeling of being afraid. And that for me is similar to oppression. And as I came to this country with a clear idea that we need to share what we have in our countries, and what I brought as my contribution was the knowledge from oppressed people as well as everybody is, including in this country. And every time I would talk about Paulo Freire, including with my first professors, now I could say my colleagues, who cannot even, multiculturalists, cannot understand what it means, the words Freire have said. While many high school students could read his book and say, oh my gosh, I have been feeling this before. So that's how Paulo Freire tested 40 years ago if his book was being understood.
Question?
Yeah, no, I don't have a question. As I said, I just want to bring this thought. So for me, immigration has become a word of oppression. And I would say, if we can think how we can change the idea of what do we want for this country, I would say what do we want for the world. More than that. Thank you.
Thank you for bringing the word oppression, because that's also a very big part of it. So I'm going to go to my left.
Hello, I'm one of the social services government employees that, should this law pass, I have probably 60 families that ICE could come and I would have to give information on them. Most of the families that I work with, migrant families, would probably be deported back to mainly Mexico and other parts of Latin and Central America. But the children that are in the daycare part of the program are born in the United States and are U.S. citizens. And I know I've heard stories about mothers with ankle bracelets so that the government can keep track of them while they're waiting for their babies to start nursing so that they can send them back and keep the children here. I've also heard stories about how they're going to start changing the U.S. citizenship requirements so that you have to be born to U.S. citizens. It's not enough to just be born in the country. And so I'm wondering if you have an update on sort of ramifications with children born in the U.S.
Well, it's the 14th Amendment thing that Eric was talking about, and the whole thing that the antis are saying is that, first of all, they're like, well, it's not tearing families apart. You could just take the kids back to Mexico with them, or, oh, well, then we just shouldn't be giving them citizenship in the first place, which that just isn't really, doesn't get to the heart of this. And there's been studies done on the impacts of raids on small children, especially after the New Bedford raid in Massachusetts, and there's just really significant trauma that happens to these kids. And it's a tough position that families are in after a parent is forced to go back to their country of origin because the kids don't really have any business going there. I mean, they can go with the parent, but they don't have the necessary documents to really set up a life there and be able to go to school and stuff. So one thing that some of the women with the bracelet actually recommended to folks who we work with is if you're a Mexican citizen, to get your binational citizenship for the kids, so that way they can freely go back if that situation, heaven forbid, should come to happen. But I think that the whole larger question here is that, as Eric was saying, the anti-immigrant movement is chipping away at our Constitution. And what a better messaging framework to be in than the immigrant community being the defenders of the Constitution, right? So I think that we have to take advantage of that situation and say that this is a part of the bedrock of our society, and it's an important thing for us that we don't have two different tiers of citizens in this society. And then I think it's also important for social service providers like yourself to say, we don't have the resources to do this. This isn't our job. This will interfere with our ability to deliver the services that we're supposed to be delivering. And I think all those things are important things to bring to light if 112 does get on the ballot.
Hi, I'm an ESL teacher, so I appreciate the thank you, even though I teach adults. I'm also Jewish, and so I have a perspective on this of not being seen as white, not being seen as all kinds of things. But what I wanted to say is, I was looking at the list of the measures, and I noticed the people that filed the second one, Meron Smith and Shariar Smith. I would like to know who those people are, because that does not sound like, you know, a typical white American. So I'd just be real curious where they're coming from and who they are and how that would help us strategize to fight that. Thanks.
Well, I'll answer really quickly, and I think I'm right about this, we were just checking, but they're over people, but I actually think that they are either of, I'm getting closer. I believe that they're of South Asian descent. But, you know, with that said, you have to understand that this is, you know, again, this is not a stupid movement, right? And this movement has to assure, to get the participation of people, has to assure people that it's not racist. It has to give the illusion of not being racist. And that's why they spend so much time talking about how they're not racist, right? So what's the best way to do that? Well, the best way to do that is to put some people of color up front. You don't need everybody. You just need enough. You know, Ralph Reed of the Christian Coalition called it the 10% strategy, right? And, you know, his thought was you just need to get about 10% of people of color out there in your leadership, right? And they're not there to speak. You know, Ward Connolly is a good example in the affirmative action movement. Ward Connolly is the leader in ending affirmative action around the United States. And people say, well, he's a black leader. Well, he's not there for black people, right? He's there to assure the white community that if you vote to end affirmative action, you won't be considered racist because, look, Ward Connolly told you it's okay. And then you're seeing the same thing in regards to these initiatives as well.
Hi, my name is Alex. I'm an organizer with the Bus Project. My question is about ballot measure 112, or initiative 112, which obviously has really deep political implications as well as, you know, the impact it will have on the community. Too soft? Okay. And I'm wondering, I know it's not an easy feat to get one of these measures on the ballot. I'm wondering if you guys know anything about the status of that measure. You mentioned it's going to be on the streets soon in terms of signature gathering, but do you know anything about the resources or the groups that are contributing to that campaign? Is it national money or state money?
I don't know if any national money is coming in yet, and if it was going to come in, it may not be in yet. So right now we're treating it as a threat until it's not a threat.
My name is Todd, and I'm an administrator at a school that does dual immersion and bilingual immersion. And I have a couple questions and ideas. One is there have been some, let's say, Republicans who have been really good at framing these conversations, like Patriot Act, good frame, that's an acronym for something. SCHIP, what does that mean? Bad frame. So how can we reframe these initiatives? And as a former teacher and an administrator of teachers, I would say, do we want to legislate how many years? Let's say you all have 2 years to learn pre-calculus, and then you're in calculus. Do we want to legislate that? And I would say no. Teachers are trusted by the community generally, so we need to reframe it, and an idea is something like, let teachers teach. Takes that whole other, all the language that they use out of it, and that makes a nice little board, you know, no on 19, let teachers teach. And for the 112 initiative, a little harder, but I want to make sure everybody's paying close attention to the voter registration aspect of that. The right wing is working hard to disenfranchise voters. The fewer voters, I mean, they even say this, the fewer people who vote, the more leverage they have. And so how can we bring that to the forefront? And so an idea to make it short and sweet is let Americans vote. Okay, gets rid of immigration and all that, and as far as I'm concerned, if you're living here, you're an American, right? So there's a new frame. Don't you want Americans to vote? Yeah, I want Americans to vote. Then vote no on 112. I mean, that's easy. So it's short and easy. Just some ideas.
Thank you. We're going to take the last two questions and then we'll wrap it up this portion.
My name is Amy and I'm an immigrant and an organizer in the Filipino-American community. And I would want to say that our community is deeply divided on this issue, that even though we have a significant proportion that are without status, that hasn't mobilized or compelled, you know, any of our leaders or our community members to be part of campaigns such as this, to really mobilize our constituency to fight against these ballot initiatives. And understandably so. There's fear, there's, you know, deep gratitude for being here, and there's the belief that we shouldn't rock the boat. So as you work with immigrant refugee leaders and community members, how do you build the courage in our community to actually stand up when obviously these are dangerous times, these are hostile times, and it's not easy for us to mobilize our folks. And at the same time, do we want the movement to then just be people with privilege, people with status, people who will not be endangered by standing up and speaking out?
I think that's a really good question, because especially on these issues, because and I don't have the little demographics charts, but immigrants are a relatively small population or percentage of the population in Oregon still. And then the percentage of those folks who can actually vote is much smaller. And so there's, I think, the tendency to want to just put all that to the side, when in fact, if we are, for those of us who care what it's going to look like the day after the election, we need to be committed to both building our grassroots-based capacity to fight these measures, and then also be around for the day after and the impact that they'll have, win or lose. So, I mean, we do a lot of community education work within the predominantly Latino community, mostly in the Mid-Willamette Valley. And it takes a different approach to get people to understand, first of all, a political system that they're totally excluded from. I mean, I don't blame people for not understanding how ballot measures work, so they can't even vote, you know. But for explaining to folks how this is really going to have really real impacts on their lives and on their communities, and finding out or identifying the collective action that people can take, and the different risk levels, because there are some people who maybe have their citizenship or feel like they're in a more secure place and want to be able to be more upfront. Then there's other people who maybe they don't want to be out front in a press conference, but even though they can't vote, they want to be able to knock on the door of their neighbor and say, I need you to vote for me, so make sure you're registered to vote and vote in this election. So those are some of the things that we do with people, and taking time to demystify both the legislative and the electoral process, because people feel like it's not something that they own. They feel like it's a system that's been imposed on them. And so once people can feel more ownership over it and be like, I have a right to participate in this, no matter what sort of documentation I have a right to have a voice in this. And I think that that's something that's really important to us.
Well, for immigrants, for most of us, because we don't have a lot of faith in the government, in the prospective countries where we come from, we tend to don't really care about the government, even when we're here. And therefore, we don't know what our rights are, and what is, what rights we have, whether we're documented or we're not documented. So it really takes people like you that are here to reach out to our communities, because you don't have any uniforms on. First of all, our people are very afraid, and they see anyone with the uniform on, and the first thing is, don't talk to me. So you guys that are here, you know what's out there for us, you know what we're losing, you know what we can gain from participating in this government. So it's up to you guys to basically reach out to our communities and empower us. And then once we get confidence, then we get involved in Center for Intercultural Organizing and any other organization out there that is trying to stand up for us.
I have a final question before we break. Eric and all of you in the panel. We have heard a lot. This is, for example, the ESL one. There has been a movement, English only movement. And Eric, as you know, we faced this year at the Salem that they were proposing legislature to make Oregon as an English only state. And it sounds to me it's also now contradictory when they're talking about not teaching children on ESL. So can you talk about that a little bit, and then we'll wrap it up.
Passing the ball here. This isn't about solutions, it's about creating division. And so there was this whole movement that was, or like media thing that the antis were doing around how they were getting sick and tired of hearing like press 1 for English, press 2 for Spanish when they call into an agency, and not wanting our resources to be spent on languages other than English. And I think it's just a thing to prey upon people's fears. People fear change. They don't understand. They might not understand Spanish when someone else is speaking it, and so instead of being like, gee, I want to learn Spanish, instead they see that as a real threat. And so I think it's preying upon people's fears. It's not about teaching kids to learn English, because if they did, they'd listen to the teachers on that, and I agree with that messaging. So, I don't know.
I would say, and then I'll make this my last too. I mean, you have to look at the English-only movement, right? And so, if you don't remember, U.S. English, the largest English-only organization was started, you probably won't be surprised, by John Tanner, right? Of the Federation for American Immigration Reform. Then, when he made that statement about people being caught with their pants up and pants down, they booted him out of U.S. English, but then U.S. English set up another organization for him called Pro English, right? Which he now runs. And then you have, I'm trying to think, Larry Pratt of English First. And if you don't remember Larry Pratt, he was the chairman of Pat Buchanan's presidential run, and he got in trouble because of his links to white supremacy. He had been active in the white supremacist movement around the United States. He was forced to step down. I remember Larry Pratt because Larry Pratt used to train death squads in Guatemala and Nicaragua, and that's his claim to fame. So these are, think about the people, right, who are active in this stuff. You think of Chris Kobach, who is, works with the legal arm of the Federation for American Immigration Reform, who authored the Patriot Act too, right? You think of Brian Bilbray, who runs the House Immigration Reform Caucus, which is the largest caucus, 109 congressmen who are members of the House Immigration Reform Caucus, making it larger than the Environmental Caucus, larger than the Progressive Caucus, larger than the Hispanic Caucus, right? And Brian Bilbray was the former lobbyist for the Federation for American Immigration Reform. I mean, these are organizers, and they're serious about the type of society that they want to build. And they realize that to do that you have to deny access to individuals. And if you can't go and pass national English-only laws now, then you start chipping away at bilingual education. You test the waters. You see what you can get away with. And when you do that, you start seeding the ground. And that's why you go after bilingual education. But also, they hope that immigrants and refugees and their communities will remain divided, right? That people won't notice. They won't take it seriously because maybe they have their own frustrations, as we all do, around how the educational system is run in this country or is being run into the ground in this country. And so, in regards to bilingual education, we all have a stake in defending it here in Oregon. And I have a friend, I'm going to stop here, I have a friend who's a day laborer. When I was asking a question about, people think of Canadians, well, they don't think of Canadians. The other thing they don't think about are Polish, right? And in Chicago, in my city, we actually have the largest Polish population outside of Warsaw, right? And there's a huge undocumented Polish population of day laborers. And Vitek is a friend of mine who's been a day laborer now for 6 years. Out there at 5:30 in the morning. He counts it, he gets ripped off, doesn't get paid about 4 or 5 times a month, and he just chalks it up to doing business. And I was talking to Vitek, and I said, Vitek, I gotta tell you something, brother. When you first came here, I bet you thought you were gonna come to the United States and you're just gonna work and make money and take care of your family. That you never thought that you're going to get thrown into having to lead a movement to defend human and civil rights in the United States. I bet you did not see that one coming. And to immigrant and refugee communities here in the United States, they've been put into this position of having to defend human and civil rights. And it's not the role of non-immigrants and non-refugees. We're not here to help, right? We're here to work alongside those immigrant and refugee leaders who are about strengthening democracy and human rights in the United States. In many ways, I think we have to switch. We're not here to help immigrants and refugees. Immigrant and refugee communities are probably going to redeem the soul of America. And our role today is to figure out how we are better allies, how we work alongside one another. And having grown up Southern Baptist, I'm going to tell you this, right now, that, the key way to show if we're serious about this, we live in a society, sadly, that is very much about property and consumerism and money. And money, sadly, carries too much value in the society, but it does. And so I'm going to tell you this, and I'm going to stop here. If you're serious about taking this on and drawing a line today, I want you to write a check. I'm going to give $100 myself to whatever comes out of this today to take this issue on seriously. And I'm going to encourage any of you today to do the same thing. If you're very serious, I want you to put your money where your mouth is, whether it's 5 cents, or whether it's $100. But today, let's show the anti-immigrant movement that we're serious about holding our community together. And that anyone who is in our country and who's about building progressive communities is an American, and we're here to defend you.
Thank you, Eric and Erica and Abdul. That has been really fascinating. And thank you, all of you, also staying in this fascinating discussion. I want to just lay out quickly what's going to happen in the next session. and then we're going to take a short break, and we'll come back. We need a break to decompress and get all this information, synthesize this information. When we come back, we're going to have the strategy session, and we're going to address your question. So where can we had a lot of information, where can we go from here? Because as I said at the beginning, this is not the only, this is a campaign, beginning of campaign that is going to be working with the other community members and organizations to defend the rights of the immigrant refugees and to expand democracy in Oregon and the United States. So that is what is going to happen. So we will come back, we'll take 10 minutes break, we'll come back here, and then we're going to talk about what are some actions, strategies that as a community that we think will take to defeat this draconian ballot initiatives. So I will encourage you to come back. And then also, if you are from organization, think about this as an opportunity, this campaign building, to train your leaders, to develop new leaders, to develop new campaign skills, to expand your base. So there's a lot of opportunity, even as was Eric saying. For me, always I say, every challenge, there's an opportunity. So let's not only think about this as a negative thing that we need to, it's an opportunity to build a multi-ethnic movement. It's an opportunity to work cross-cultural community. So this is an opportunity for all of us. As much as it's a bad thing, this is an opportunity to build a movement. And this is an opportunity to build an immigrant refugee movement who are multi-ethnic, multicultural, multiracial, and multi-issue also. So let's see as an opportunity and as a base building, as a leadership development, all of the above. Let's come back 10 minutes and then we'll go strategy session. So let's take a 10-minute break. And one more time, thank you. And I want to emphasize, put your calendar, there will be a meeting, the first meeting of the grassroots table will be December 15, Saturday, December 15. And if you sign up, we will send you the information, we'll be calling you, we'll be setting up a meeting with you, and hopefully the organizations will be outreached, and we will have our first grassroots table meeting again, December 15, a month from us or so from now. The first group to report back, and I'm hoping that the other folks, for the sake of time, will join with us as we go. So, you want to start group 3, I think it's here.
Okay. I'll try to be quick, but we had a really great discussion. So we started with the first question on question truths table that we're creating, and the sort of statewide progressive table that might create some of those languages like chaos in the classroom that we don't like. We talked about how this is not only a horrible thing to and reactions to the presentation. There was some concern about how we get the turnout we need, how do we get 50 plus 1%, at the same time building grassroots power and our messaging that we want. We talked about different levels of oppression and ways where, and spaces where immigrants and refugees can be involved and appreciated, so less reliant on language like we have today, but maybe using popular education or theater. We talked about how all of us are leaders of our own little circles, and we can mobilize who we know, and we can start there. And the difference between the grassroots opportunity, educating and going people to where they are, whether that's in the schools or cab drivers, lots of other places where immigrants are, thinking beyond this election cycle toward building a movement and long-term. We talked about lessons learned from other places like Colorado, also lessons learned around Measure 36. We then started talking about goals and actions, and creating talking points, educating the fence sitters, getting information out to volunteers, making sure that we poll our messaging, have a traveling panel. There could be a train-the-trainer. There were lots and lots of ideas. Anyway, and then we started going around the circle and talking about all the organizations that we're involved with. And so that was just like a ton of potential organizations, like 3 pages worth that I'm not going to get into now. I think that's enough.
Hi, I'm Laura, and I get to report back for the Outside Portland group. I don't know if we had a number, but we are the Outside Portlanders. And one of the first things that was really kind of exciting was to see how much of the state and even the nation and the world we had represented in the group. We had a really nice, broad cross-section of people demonstrating just how important this issue is, and that there are people even in small towns and in rural parts of the state who are very concerned about fighting these initiatives. And this kind of gives a picture of some of the people, some of the places we live and work. And then we talked some about things that we bring already in the organizations that we have, some of the membership lists, alliances, personal experiences that we all have to share, either as, you know, teachers or immigrants, our different experiences. And then we talked about some of the challenges. And we also talked about the fact that the challenges are also opportunities, that a lot of these challenges we need to figure out ways to turn them to be so that we're on the offensive rather than on the defensive. And then as far as educating the community, our brainstorming of ideas for what to do, and some ideas were getting churches to sign up to be sanctuary places, awareness and education of the immigrant communities of their rights, that you don't have to answer the door if the FBI comes or the ICE comes to your door. And then also phone lists, and then we talked about the idea of decline to sign or bigot busters, where we actually go out and are there where they're gathering signatures and have literature and, you know, educate people and ask them to please not sign. And then having meetings in other languages other than English, like the meeting today. Voter registration idea, also with literature. And reaching out to other organizations, all the different organizations we're involved with, and not involved with, but other organizations in our community. And particularly including people of color organizations. And then we had some fundraising ideas, house parties, open mic fundraisers, potlucks, reaching out to businesses that care about this issue, and engaging the universities and other institutes of higher education. So, thank you.
So we were group number 2, and we started out just listing reactions to the panel discussion. So one of the things that people brought up a lot is the need to really develop concrete vision in addressing issues of class and economics as well. I'm going to go through this a little quickly because we have a lot to get through. People also talked about the need for leadership development in recent immigrant communities, and also conducting outreach to people who aren't necessarily on our side, might be more people who consider themselves on a bench, and also looking at what is really achievable or winnable within a ballot measure campaign. We actually had a number of educators in our group, And one of the things that was brought up multiple times was the need to involve the education community in this ballot measure fight. And also talking about within the education community, there can be a number of proactive measures taken, like making policies on the board level as well. We also discussed briefly messaging and the importance of focusing on children, and also defining messaging to work with different communities that we are going to need to engage in throughout the campaign. And also something came up multiple times was questions about where the antis are getting funding to do this, their campaign. We started a really initial list of organizations to outreach to as well, and I'm not going to read these out, but this is just a start of a much longer process, of an outreach process. And finally, we brainstormed action items. After we finished, we started trying to consolidate many of the action items that we brainstormed into 3, which is difficult to do. But certain common themes that we recognized was the importance of having good forms of communication. So within that framework, things that were mentioned were developing a speakers bureau, developing an accessible frequently asked questions list, and also developing pamphlets that were in multiple languages and using popular language, so not in wonkish talk, but kind of the language of the streets so people can really relate to it. We also talked about, in our challenges discussion, some of the divisions that exist within our own communities, and trying to find more points of unity, and then also hoping that we can come out of the December 15th meeting with really concrete action items and action steps, and that we're really giving people actions to take back in their communities in a direct way, and in a way that is really empowering for people.
So we have the last group report. Amy?
Okay. We came out with a huge laundry list of ideas, so I'm going to try and condense them into like the major categories. So for the different roles that we thought we could play, primarily we thought we could be there to share resources. So whether it's our volunteers to do phone banking or distributing leaflets, or sharing already some of the systems and organizing networks that we're already a part of as a base for people to educate and spread more awareness and raise more awareness. That was one role that we could play. Another was around outreach and organizing. We already have, kind of the mechanism and the strategies in place to organize and mobilize people. So to kind of activate that and make sure that they're integrated into this campaign. And at the same time, we can also think of unlikely allies who may not be in the same room with us and who haven't been traditionally in these kinds of campaigns. They can be people that we can outreach to as well and kind of educate and inform. And then around framing strategies, people had a lot of ideas around maybe using market analysis to kind of frame the issue, or gather more research about the impact and cost and consequences of these ballot initiatives, and really also appealing to people's broader vision of what America should look like and be. And then for every role that we figured, there was an accompanying challenge to go with. So some of the challenges that we thought or we saw were around funding, because this is going to take intensive resources, human and financial. And then also around our organizing strategies. There are people that we haven't really been able to develop and deepen our relationship with, and so that's going to take a lot of time that sometimes within a short-term campaign framework will not allow us, but that we need to do. We also saw that we had to look at the safety of the immigrant refugee leaders that we're going to mobilize and engage, because obviously these are hostile and dangerous times, and we need to think of how to protect them, but continue to build their leadership as we develop this campaign. For others, some of the challenges were around framing.
the issue, how to talk about racism, even with allies who may not think that they're racist but can't see the racism behind these ballot initiatives. Talking to allies who feel disconnected, who may not have the information that they're looking for and don't know where to look for. Another challenge was around building solidarity, how to deepen and build relationships with the African American community, how to learn the lessons of the Cesar Chavez campaign that went on, and learn from the fallout that happened there. And also how to bring in public service providers who may not be the activists or the choir members that we've usually talked to, but how to bring them in. And then some of the more specific action points that we thought of, there's a December 10 Human Rights March coming up. We thought that we should ally and align ourselves with that. Now is the time that I think educators are creating their curricula. It's an opportune moment to really integrate these issues into that and kind of develop our new generation of leaders. Vision PDX has a value around equity, and as it's shifting into Action PDX, how to get into that and make sure that that's operationalized the way we want it to. To learn from some of the strategies that we used when we mobilized thousands of immigrant and refugees for the May Day Parade and the May Day Rap Marches, how to get that number again, and to maybe engage the media that was very useful then. But as we do that, think again of the immigrant refugee safety. There's already existing networks like the Portland Immigrant Refugee Coalition, so to continue engaging with them and mobilizing them and making sure that our campaigns don't contradict each other. And to connect with the national networks and the relationships that we have with them so that we're part of a more coordinated movement, but at the same time, make sure that they don't take over and get leadership over our own campaigns and tell us what to do. And lastly, really encourage immigrant and refugees who can become citizens to become citizens and exercise their electoral power.
What is it this with me and the mics today? Again, it's 4 o'clock, and I want to thank you all and each one of you taking time and giving up your Saturday morning and afternoon to really learn these important issues. As I said, this is a campaign, and it's a campaign that we're willing to win, but it's not only winning, as we said, it's about educating, empowering, and organizing cross-culturally. That is the key message that we as a community, progressive community, social justice community, immigrant and refugee community, we are here to create a different vision, to create a vision that's inclusive, a vision that allows the community to be inclusive. That is the message that we want to come across and tell these folks that come on board. This is where the future of America is going to be going, and as Eric said, immigrant and refugee community members and leaders, we will be energizing the next level of creating equitable society. So I want to thank all of you. I want to thank the staff of the Center for Intercultural Organizing, their hard work. And I want to thank all the volunteers, CIO volunteers, other organizations, volunteers, all the facilitators, all the community members who came here and spent time with us and put this effort at the beginning. It's a beginning. Let's celebrate. It's a time to celebrate, not only to think about challenges, but let's celebrate this as a time to bring our community together and build a community. Thank you. December 15th, we'll get back to you, we'll send you, collect this information, and the next meeting will be December 15th. Thank you.